Hi, I'm Beth.
Hi, I'm Ashley.
Hi, I'm Callie.
And we're Shelf Care.
Today we're going to be going over the river. I forgot the name.
The Frozen River.
Okay. I was like, wait, I forgot the name.
By Ariel
Law. I don't know how you say it. Lawn.
Lahan.
I'm just gonna say it by Ariel.
You tell us.
Okay.
So historical fiction. I really loved it. What did y'all rate it?
I rated it 5 stars.
5 stars. And I'm a stingy 5-star giver. I can probably count on 1 or 2 hands the amount of books I've given 5 stars. So high praise.
Yeah, I also rated it 5 stars. And I like easy reads. Which maybe that makes me shallow, but I like things that catch me in the beginning. I like cute little romances. I just want it to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that this caught my attention and kept my attention is a big reason I gave it 5 stars, but it also made me feel things.
Yeah.
And it's a book. Like, it's a thick book, but I flew through it.
Yeah.
And was never bored. I feel like it has so many awesome elements. You've got the historical fiction. It's loosely based on a true story. It's based on a true character, which was super awesome, super inspirational. But then it's like there's murder mystery and there's romance and there's also like societal issues. So I mean, it had everything for me.
This is the very first book that I ever read the author's note.
I wish I would have read it because I didn't really think about it until you read it. You told me about it and I was like, wow.
I was obsessed with the author's note. I never read the author's note and I loved it. I think it pulled everything together. I also, something I liked about this book, and you're the one that brought it to my attention before I ever started it. I think you did too. You said, I love the relationship between her and her husband.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was crazy.
It is such a old-fashioned romance.
And it's like better than like the romance books.
Yes. It's such a real romance, and he loves her in a way that was not common for that time. Let's hear your take.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to find. Okay. So there's a part, and it's on page 63, and this is when I was hooked on this book and on this relationship because it's set in 1798. So there was very much then a patriarchal mindset. So women were to be seen and not heard. They really had no voice. And a lot of the relationships, you think about this really huge imbalance of power, and you don't traditionally think about there being maybe a basis of love. It was more convenience. At least that's what I think of. And this line just got to me. So she's speaking, she being the main character, Martha Ballard, who's a midwife. She says, she's looking at her hair, and she says, I lift it, coiling the hair around my finger, marveling at the single patch of silver. Ephraim, who's her husband, starts talking to her. He walks over there and he says, I like it, he says, lifting the streak from my hand. He slides it through his fingers. It is one thing to be old, I tell him. It's another to feel old. That makes me feel old. Well, it makes me feel like a king. He smiles at my curious look. Only a fool would be upset to find a vein of silver running through his most beloved territory.
Chills. Just hearing it, chills.
They had such a good relationship.
They had such a good relationship, just because you can see maybe a little bit of insecurity in her about her aging, and especially you think about like what that is for women, especially women at this time who, I don't know, really women in general who didn't have rights as much, where beauty is your commodity, and so you think about
you have babies, you're supposed to be beautiful, have babies,
and right?
That's gone.
Right, and so with the gray hair, like she's past her childbearing years. Like, what's her value? I mean, I say that in quotes, and he's like, it makes me feel like a king. And just the value he sees in her was so special to me. It's definitely a marriage where he sees her as his equal and his partner, not as his servant, I guess, which was kind of the dynamic you think of at this time.
I loved that aspect of the romance. This book has 0 spice. You could say 1. You could say 1 on spice.
Which I think they had cute stuff. Yeah.
I didn't care at all. I didn't think the spice was necessary.
No.
Because their romance was just so
I felt like
heartfelt.
Having spice in this might have cheapened the romance for me, because there was something sacred about their relationship. Like, that was very clearly for them. That was not for us, the reader. And I would have felt like an intrusion.
Mhm.
I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it. And, you know, I love spice, but this book was,
It was
the
beautiful.
romance in this book was one of my favorite romances.
And it's not even a romance book.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. She did such a good job.
Yeah.
So I think what initially intrigued me about this book was that it was about a midwife. Because
Mhm.
I lean towards healthcare things, but I don't know a lot about midwives.
Yeah, they're not very common nowadays.
And so I was like, this could be interesting.
Mhm.
And I loved she kept a record of all of the babies that she helped deliver, I should say. And I loved that she kept a record. I love that she wasn't always able to read and write. And her husband
Taught her when
how
she was
to read
18.
and write.
Mhm.
And then it ended up helping her throughout this book.
I loved that even when she started learning, it was kind of like she was already a little bit older and it was kind of random
Yes.
because of Elsbeth, who was her teacher.
Yeah.
And she taught her because she was going blind.
She taught her to be a midwife, right?
Yes. And it was kind of random because she just called for her while she was already delivering a baby and just kind of told her what to do and kind of trusted her to know. And it was so good. I loved that part.
I loved all of that because in the author's note it talked about the true Martha Ballard, and she did the same thing. She kept a record. And what I loved about her records, her journal, it reads like a medical record. Her journal read like a medical record. It was just the facts, which ends up being very, very important later in the book. And that is how the real Martha Ballard kept these records, or this journal. It was more like medical records. And I think the whole practice of midwifery is so fascinating to me because the birth space in those times was so different, and it really hasn't changed until recently that men were allowed in the birth space, but it was women who delivered babies all the time, and it was really this place of womanhood, I guess. And I think getting some of that perspective, you get a lot of that from Martha. She's what we would call a girl's girl, but like of the time. She talked about backdating, backdating like birth certificates or conception dates to protect the reputation of whoever. I don't know. She was just like the ultimate girl's girl.
Yeah. I think that one thing that I really drew me to her, I guess, was that she was strong in her beliefs.
Independent.
And she was independent. There's a scene in the book where she goes into the general store. I think they call it something else, but that's what it is, a general store. And these women, this woman runs out, and we learn that this lady had a child out of wedlock. She wouldn't tell who the father was, and so she was pretty much like outcast. And she went into the store at a normal time when all of the other ladies would go, and they were ugly to her, so she ran out crying. And Martha was like, absolutely not. Go in, get what you need. And then she chastised these women in front of everyone for acting the way that they did. She basically called them hypocrites because they also had babies, but they conceived babies before they were married. It just so happened that they were made honest women. And so I love that she stood up for her in front of people. That kind of just proves to her character. And then that woman later on in the book, Sarah, right?
Sarah White.
Sarah White. She actually becomes a big part in
helping Martha.
Yeah, Martha teaches her how to read.
Going back to those ladies that you were talking about in the store, how I think both of them were pregnant, and neither of them ended up calling Martha, and so they went with that doctor, and what happened to their babies. Yeah, and that was really sad.
Ooh, that doctor was one of the most infuriating characters I have ever read.
So belittling.
And he never got better.
No, there was no redemption arc.
Yeah, not even at the end when he had to apologize to her.
Yeah,
when she was helping him.
She saved his wife. He still never said, I'm sorry for what I guess he apologized, but
kind of.
Not really.
Not a real apology.
I think that.
And I think it took a lot of courage for her to even help them.
Yes.
and to not be petty and to make it about her work.
I mean, the only time that she ever refused to help someone was when, remind me her name, Lydia?
Yes, that was the wife of
Jonathan. No. Jonathan's the one that died.
Jonathan's
North. Joseph North.
Yes, Jonathan's her son.
Yeah, so Lydia North
got these awful headaches.
Yeah, she had migraines. I think, what did they call it?
I can't remember what they called it. I don't think they actually
called it anything. But anyway, she had horrible migraines. She was taking a tonic that Martha made, and she came to the house in this big buildup of everything. Like, Joseph North was arrested, but he ended up fleeing, so he was never, they didn't catch him. And she knew where he was, and Martha just thought she was such a weak woman.
Yeah.
And she denied her headache medicine until she said, where her husband was, and she wouldn't give her husband up. And so she left. And I loved in this moment, her husband didn't even have to say anything. Martha's husband didn't have to say anything. He just looked at her and he said, I wouldn't have expected that from you. And she immediately felt bad because it's not her job to judge. It's her job to help people.
That's what I was going to ask, like, how you guys felt about that scene where she denied her the medicine. What were your, I guess, thoughts and feelings on that?
I think I saw where she was coming from, but then also, like, it wasn't right. She can't be like those women, and how her husband reacted and stuff like that, kind of like checking her at least. And he waited until that lady left.
Yes.
I thought that was really important and showing that he supported her, but it still wasn't right.
I think that it just kind of shows that everyone in healthcare, humans in general, they're gonna have moments.
Yeah,
they're gonna have moments where they want to let their emotions take over, but it's what you do with it.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go after her, but obviously she got pulled somewhere else, and then ended up going to that house later to give her the tonic. So I liked that part. I'm glad that it was quickly rectified, though, because I think I would have maybe judged a little bit if it hadn't been.
One of my favorite characters from the book was Cyrus.
Yes.
And I know, like, I really liked him. I know he wasn't that big in the story, but just seeing his story and how he was mute, but he still knew everything. And it really made me sad how, I mean, he was such a great person, but just because he couldn't talk, that he was never going to have a family or have a life outside of his parents.
Especially at that time, things were so different. There wasn't, maybe for people who had some of those challenges, there wasn't the adaptations that we have now. And so you're basically just seen as less than in society. And his character ends up being so important and ends up with this whole story that I thought was really beautiful.
I wish that he would have ended up in love and moved off and all the things, but that wouldn't have been true to the real.
I think that's the only thing I wish I would have been able to change. Him having a good ending.
I think but she did such a good job making us feel for him. So Martha really did have, and they never said what happened, but she had a challenged son, is all that it says. It doesn't say if he was mute or anything like that. But they just kind of took that creative liberty with it to make it like that. But I love that she made sure that all of her children could read and write. Literacy was super important.
I loved that. And then her daughters that were at home, which we didn't really get to see much about her older children that had left the house. Just the two that were in the house. Yeah. And they were already being courted, which I kind of liked that aspect.
How many, I can't remember off the top of my head. Do you guys remember how many children she lost?
She had 9 children.
She lost
3. An 8-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Or maybe a 3-year-old.
And what was it, the plague?
Yes.
I thought she was such a resilient character. Just the fact that her grief seemed to really make her stronger versus consuming her. And I think there's a lesson in that, and the way, like, tragedy comes for everyone, maybe to different degrees and different severities. But I've heard, I hope to never experience this firsthand, but I've heard the loss of a child is one of the most horrific things you can go through. And to lose 3, I can't even imagine. I know it was more common back then to lose children, but I loved her resilience, and I love that she could still be a midwife and bring life into the world and just take her grief and push forward and still do a lot of good with her life. And I think, if you were someone who was really struggling with something like that, that could be really, really inspirational. That would be a character to look up to.
Even with how she had to bury her own 3 children, just being a midwife, any other patient that lost a baby, she had to bury them or deal with it, as she put it, and I thought that was really hard.
Yeah.
And she didn't really talk much about it, but sometimes I think it said maybe throw them in the river or stuff like that, and I thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. I think it was such a different time, and that is something about this book. It does not sugarcoat some of the things of that time. So one of the premises of the book is there is a sexual assault, so trigger warning for that. So there's a sexual assault and a murder, and it's kind of a mystery of solving how those two how those two are connected and what's going on there. Some of that was pretty rough, and the way the assault was handled really was hard for me to read.
Yeah.
That was really, really tough, because it's basically like, oh, you can't prove it, we don't really care, was kind of the legal system view.
And even Martha had her own rape when she was younger, and one thing that I really liked about her husband is he married her regardless, which was, a good thing, but then he waited to bed her until she had her first period, so she never had a doubt that if they got pregnant. And I thought that was great.
That made me so emotional.
Yeah. Well, and that little, I think it was like 2 words, or it was maybe 1 sentence, where he was like, I'll let you wait until you tell me what you want. And that was so big, because it wasn't just because like her period. He didn't care whose baby it was or whatever,
but just for her peace of mind.
For her peace of mind, and then just for her to feel safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I loved that.
Yes.
The thing that stuck out to me, one of the things that stuck out to me about the court system. So Martha could not even testify without her husband present.
That made me so mad. This book also enraged me.
Yeah. There's just things that you just don't think about. Those are all really like real things that you don't think about. Women just had no rights.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm surprised Martha was even allowed to work.
To be a midwife.
But she could be a midwife because that was okay, because that was like a woman thing. Like having babies, that was like a woman's space, and so that was okay. But when she tried to step out of that into more of a healer role or like a coroner, and was like, because her and the doctor disagreed on the cause of death with the murder. He said it was an accident. She said it was a murder. And so once she stepped out of that accepted role of a woman, there was conflict and there was issue. Even though she has all of these skills and has been healing forever, she still wasn't seen or heard. Yeah. And that was infuriating to me.
That was hard. And this baby, I mean, she's I think it says she's almost 50, or she is 50. No, she's in her mid-50s. So she's been doing this for 30 years. And this baby, 20-something guy, just out of Harvard, has no idea what he's doing, but he thinks he knows so much more
just because he's a
doctor,
man.
And he's a man.
And he's a man, yeah.
And I'm sure he was just being paid off by North to change up the reports. But one thing that really got me was every time they had their little town meeting at the bar, and she had to report who had a baby, and if they were single mothers, they had to pay.
Yes.
I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, so the men had to pay a fine as well.
But really only if you could prove.
Only if you could prove it. And on top of that, if the woman didn't say the man's name, then they didn't ask any other questions. And they said the reason, which I guess they do say that women don't lie when they're giving birth. That was the thing. And so if they say Henry is the father of my baby, they do take that. I guess they don't have to prove that, which is crazy because they have to prove rape, but they don't have to prove that they're the father.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. I hated that women had, you know, like bigger discipline.
Right.
For that.
Yes.
And their reputation was ruined. Nothing happened to the man.
Mm-hmm. One thing that really got me was towards the end when Martha helped deliver. Was it Sally? No, who's the one that got raped?
Oh, Rachel.
Rachel?
Isn't that her name? I thought it was Rachel.
But
it's the preacher's wife.
Yes.
So the preacher's wife was sexually assaulted in the very beginning of the book, and the entire book is going through her trial process. And so when this comes, she gets pregnant as a result of the rape, and when it comes to resolution, when she's having the baby, when she says throw it in the river.
Yeah, when she didn't want to keep her baby, which understandable, but I mean,
that was hard.
That was hard.
It was, and I wonder if she ever got the baby back or what ended up happening, because I know that Sarah was breastfeeding the baby and keeping the other baby for her, but
I would like to think, because that really happened. She did take the baby to Sarah White. I would like to think Sarah White kept the baby, because she named it and all the things. I don't think that Rachel took the baby from like the way that they played it out. I don't think she ever took the baby back. Again, though, that showed just how good of a person Sarah White was.
For how much hate she got.
Yeah, she was a pariah, but like she was just so generous the whole time. Can you imagine though being a midwife, going to deliver a baby and then saying throw it in the river?
No.
Rough. So is there anything in this book you didn't like?
I mean, from the author's point of view, not that
obviously no one likes rape, but like from the way she wrote the book, is there anything you didn't like?
No, I mean, obviously I would have liked to know a little bit more, like after what happened. I wish she would have wrote maybe like another chapter or two just to kind of like tell me a little more of like what happened to everybody. But I think I loved it. I don't think I would have changed anything.
Do y'all feel like justice was served?
No.
That's what I didn't like about it.
Yes, that was what I was going to say. That's what I didn't like. I feel like justice wasn't served. And I keep going back to the authors now because that really just wrapped things up for me. So she ended up killing Joseph Burgess. No, not Joseph. Burgess.
North? Oh, Burgess?
What was his name?
Joshua.
Yes, Joshua. They both start with a J, so it makes me. So she ended up killing him. But in real life, that didn't happen. And in fact, there were multiple rapes. And the author says, she couldn't go into all of that. She couldn't stomach it. She didn't think anyone would want to read it. She didn't want to do that. So what she did was she killed him off in the beginning, made it into somewhat of a mystery, and that's why she went the direction that she went. And so I know that there was no justice in real life, but man, I kind of wish the book would have wrapped up with a little bit more justice.
Me too. That was the only thing that bothered me, and then I read the author's note, and I was like, oh, we got the good version.
We got more
we actually, as rough as it was, we got the pretty glamorized version of the true events.
And I do love, well, I don't love it. It's terrible. But the way that she wrapped up who killed Joshua, so he'd raped someone else. And when you raped, as they said in the book, when you raped multiple people, you're not going to stop when you've gotten away with it. And so that's why they didn't wait around for justice, which obviously wasn't served anyways. So the way that they did it probably was the best justice he could have given. But yeah, so that was the one thing I didn't like. Would you read another book by this author?
I would.
Yeah.
I definitely would. I think I actually added one of them to my Libby to see. It's going to be a couple months.
On the cover, it says author of I Was Anastasia, and I really want to read that book.
I didn't even read that. But yeah, I definitely would read another one for her.
Yeah, it was good.
Well, how exciting. It was fun having Callie back for an episode.
It
Maybe
was
she'll make another appearance.
fun. We'll see.
We'll see y'all next time, okay?
Bye.
Bye.